with David Knipe and David Bowen, taking us through a little bit of a vision and walkthrough of the product portfolio. We're then going to be joined by Scott Reed from Inteco to talk about .NET 5 and the implications for our product portfolio going forward. And then we have Dean Barker joining us to talk about headless and giving us some updates there. And then our partners from Made to Engage will be joining us to talk about experimentation as well. And then we'll be wrapping up with Cody and Joey and team. They'll be talking about MVP, community, and certification. So stick around to hear some updates there as well. And then towards the end, we're just going back to the main room. So don't forget to go back to the main room for some latest updates there. Before we start our first session with David Knipe, just quickly, as you've seen in the previous session, you can interact with us through chat. Make sure you select chat on the tab on your right-hand side. You can throw in some questions in there as well. Myself and a couple of other people will be helping moderate some of these questions along the session. You can upvote others' questions as well if you have a similar type question to ask. And if you don't get to all of your questions through the session, we will be recording them and we'll be sharing with you afterwards as well. So with no further ado, let me just make sure we have everything ready to go and we can kick off our first session.
Welcome to this session, Product Suite Vision and Walkthrough, presented by myself, David Bowen, VP of Product Management, and David Knipe, the VP of Solution Architecture. And in this session, we're really going to cover two parts of the platform. The create part on the left, where our joint customers use this platform to create their experiences using the templates and components built by you, our partners. And the optimize section on the right, which is a collection of the services that track customer interaction and allow our customers to experiment and personalize their experiences. So starting off on the left, as you'll be familiar, we have a few clouds in this create area, the content cloud and the commerce cloud, allowing our joint customers to manage the content and products inside the platform and using the applications that you developed to deliver the customer experience. And we're talking today about the next evolution of these products, the CMS and commerce clouds. When you use the platform, you'll see that we've updated the user interface for business users and developers alike, used to configure and administrate the solution. We started to adopt the Optimize the Axiom design system, and you'll see the UI today here transform into the UI that you'll have very soon in the platform, which looks like this. And we've updated the UI not only for look and feel, but we've also optimized it for speed and responsiveness. So you'll notice the speed of the UI, the flexibility and responsiveness of that UI. So it's not only UI that's new in these in the latest version of the platform. We've also increased performance, and you'll notice that the performance tests that we will publish, we've achieved 10 times increase in responsiveness for the 99th percentile responses in our load tests. So a significant increase in response time to customers, which will help you achieve better SEO scores and also the responsiveness of the UI as well. As I've just noted, we've updated the admin area, visitor groups in the new UI with the modeling UI. We've also updated the content APIs. So you've got push-pull models of JSON manifests. We're also shipping a new JavaScript and .NET SDK on top of these APIs that are compatible with the latest version of CMS 12 and Commerce 14. And within the Commerce platform, we have moved away from the Commerce Manager as a separate application. So that's now been replaced by these new administration UIs, as well as the new customer service application that you'd already be familiar with to manage customers and their orders. We've also added tokenization payment types in the platform, so better support for more modern payment types in the platform. And the last area I want to talk about is Project GraphQL. And this is a new service that's currently in a closed alpha. And the key to this is we're enabling a GraphQL content delivery API as a service. It will synchronize your content from your content platform. This is available today to OMVP. So if you have an OMVP within your partner, then they can access this today. They can evaluate this new service. We're looking for as much feedback as we can get before we take this to public beta. But let's dig into this and see all this in action. I'm going to hand over to David Knight.
Okay, thanks, David. So what I want to be able to do is talk to you today about how we can actually build sort of modern applications. So, in terms of a term, people say, what's a modern application? So typically that has single page applications, progressive web applications, and where typically the front end is very separated from the back end implementations. So what we're looking at here right now is actually the Foundation Spa React starter site. So this is a headless implementation of a front end using React, and uses TypeScript and some other sort of libraries in there. And this is a normal single page application. So what's happening behind the scenes here is that actually we're using the content APIs that David was describing earlier to provide the content to the presentation. But more importantly, this is actually running on my local machine. So this is running on port 9000, and there's some DNS here that loops back to my local machine. So if you have a look at this, you can see actually how the application looks. And as you can see right now, we have some interesting things here. So this is provided as a starter solution, as a kind of a reference. And you have things like a TypeScript representation of my standard page. And we also have the ability to synchronize the models down. So again, as a front-end developer, as someone building UI, I don't need to care or worry about .NET. What I need to care about is building my React application to provide my presentation. And again, with the appropriate pattern as well, you can actually use this as part of DXP. So importantly here is that you can build this application as you put it into the correct place and then continually deploy that in production. Using our smooth deploy capability, it means that end users see no downtime. And it means that you can allow your front-end devs just to work in React in Visual Studio Code. I'm on a Mac here, again, just to build the front ends in any way that you wish. So in terms of where we are there, that's a fairly standard sort of single page application in a sort of a headless pattern. But we can go a little bit further than that. Of course, one thing we've always done is optimize is provide great experiences for editors. And again, on-page editing, the ability to preview and WYSIWYG everything we expect, this is what we get here. So what we can do is actually provide the UI, which has been provided by Content Cloud, but the presentation is actually done for me on my local machine. So what we're looking at right now is actually a on-page editable version of our site, where the front end in this example in the development setup is running on my machine. In production, that would be running as part of DXP. But actually, I can then start to go in and actually have a look at some content again. So everything our editors are used to, everything you'd expect, everything that, to be honest, if you're going to provide a great service to your customers, editors should have a good experience. Why shouldn't they? So here we can see our very familiar on-page editing. Again, just to reiterate, everything from this kind of bar down here is running on my machine. And again, everything that's running up here is then running in Content Cloud. Again, everything we'd expect today. Of course, then we can retain all the good things we'd be able to expect. So on-page editing capabilities, the ability to then preview that change, to see that here. Again, all the good stuff to be able to revert versions, share versions of that content, whatever it may be. So that's great. Of course, then if we wanted to change that model, we can use our new UI within admin mode. So again, as you can see right now, I could find my standard page. Oops, helps if I could type. And again, you can see this in here. And then when I'm in standard page, then you can see actually I can add properties if I wish to do so. So again, in a production scenario, even during the development process, I can create my model, save it here using a user interface, not aware of anything happening in .NET. I can come into my single page application, again, back in Visual Studio Code. I can run my sync models job, and then I actually have a TypeScript representation of this model available for me in JavaScript, ready to work with in my front end. So this is pretty good. So we have a nice clean separation between the front and the back end, again, running on DXP. But one thing I really like about the velocity you can get with single page applications is that we're removing any constraints from front end developers. So front end developers may decide that, well, actually, as part of user interface, we say, actually, we want to move the H1 around. Now, I'm no designer, so apologies for any designer people in the room here. But I say, I actually want my content area appearing above my H1 and my body text. So again, I can try that. I can do that very quickly. And again, in order to do that, I can actually take this. I can move this and move that below my content area. I hit save. Now, obviously, this is going to compile for me. And again, what will happen is I can then see this change instantly when this refreshes. So what's happening here from a developer productivity perspective is that the front-end developers are working unconstrained. They are seeing their changes instantly. There's been no deployments. There's been no commit. They've seen this on the local machine. Again, obviously, when they're ready to commit, they can commit that into the repo and obviously get that shared to everyone else. Importantly here as well is that change also then affects what the editing experience can look like. So again, just to kind of reiterate that, this is obviously changed for me. Again, if I change this back and hit save again, you'll see actually edit mode itself also updates again when I'm doing this. Front-end developers have an unconstrained experience. They're actually enabled to see what the editors of their site will actually be able to do, how they can actually interact with those editors as well. And again, working in a single page application using React, or whichever libraries you wish at the front end, it means that they're unconstrained. So again, we're really decoupling the kind of requirement for .NET for front-end development within Optimizely. David, back over to you.
So we're going to look at the DXP more broadly now. And in particular, David's just done a fantastic demo of the items on the left, the Content Cloud and the Commerce Cloud, and the next evolution of this platform. We're now going to take a deeper dive into the items in the middle and on the right. So the Optimizely data platform that connects everything together with the customer identity. And in the right-hand side, the Intelligence Cloud products and the full stack products as well. And these are used by our customers to optimize their experience and experiment with new ideas. Across the middle, we have a number of core capabilities, and these capabilities run across all channels, either experience channels or activation channels that are downstream with the customer experience. We've got targeting and segmentation on the left in the middle, where we are allowing you to build segments and build predictive segments to target customers, to be able to test and experiment new ideas and see the performance and the outcomes, the impacts and outcomes of those experiments. To provide real-time triggers into experiences on the site or experiences through activation channels by email or other notification systems. And to deploy AI to promote recommendations or optimization for customers or segments in the experience. And on the right-hand side, the ability to report and see analytics on not only the experience as a whole, but the impact of personalization and experiments on the customers and the outcomes that you're looking for. And at the bottom, you'll see the Optimizely data platform. And this really underpins the entire DXP. It allows us to unify customer identities. It allows us to manage consent and preferences to make sure that we're interacting with customers in the way that they want. And also we adhere to privacy and compliance legislation by different geographies. And this platform is in sync with the assets, with the products, the contents that you're presenting to customers in the application. This Intelligence Cloud, and we'll see some more of that in action.
Great, thanks, David. So what we're going to be talking about today is kind of some of the elements of the Intelligence Cloud, and specifically ODP, Optimizely Data Platform, and also Optimizely Web, which are sort of experimentation and personalization capability. Now, the important thing to note here is that this doesn't have to be applied onto an Optimizely CMS or Content Cloud instance. You can actually use these with any sort of custom sites you already have. And Optimizely Data Platform at the heart really is about actually understanding your organizational metrics. So as you can see right now, here's an example where we've got some sort of 1,000-foot metrics about our business. So we can say, what is it about our customers we know based on the information we're tagging on the site. And again, actually understanding things like obviously new repeat customers, how many orders we're taking and so on. Now to install this is just a tracking script you put onto the site. And again, you can then start to track things like page views, product views, conversion events, add to basket, add to wish list, those types of events. And then this will then automatically start to give you these types of metrics that you can be able to get. Now you can take any one of these metrics. And again, I'm going to just move through the tabs here and say, actually, I've got my new purchases. So we can actually understand what our new purchases look like. And then we can say, okay, I want to move my new purchases into a repeat purchasing state. So you can do that basically by creating a campaign straight on the page. Now, what that campaign allows you to do is basically provide nudges. So again, that can be an on-page modal pop-up. That can be a nudge. That can be an SMS notification. It can be a push notification into the application, whatever it may be that you want to be able to offer to your marketers to do that. Now, importantly, when you create those campaigns, is that they're basically built around recipes, and our recipes essentially sort of predefined patterns of doing something. And as partners, as David mentioned earlier, we want to be able to go and offer those out to partners. So again, as a partner, you may have a unique integration with something you already work with, or perhaps something bespoke for your organization, and then you can create the recipe to do that. So it could well be that you say, I know that actually by moving my customer from my new purchasing to a repeat purchasing state, by offering them a free trial or whatever it may be, you can then create that campaign as a recipe and offer that to your customers as a unique offering. So again, importantly here is that, it isn't just a kind of a black box sort of SaaS solution. It gives you as partners the ability to add a lot of value to that. Importantly though, what we can also do is actually then using the data and the tracking that we're already collecting on site, we've got sort of built-in reporting. So things like win-back opportunity analysis. So this is where, particularly in the repeat customer state, we can actually look at customers who are engaged, but then we say actually what our win-back customers look like. Again, this is where we can start to say, okay, our customers, based on the likelihood of still being a customer, say, okay, someone's engaged over here, don't worry about those. These are perhaps, these are kind of gone. But again, these are the customers we have the opportunity with to say, actually, they should be purchasing by now, and they're not. They're in a win-back state. So what opportunities do we have to try and engage those customers to bring them back and make them perhaps that repeat customer or a loyal customer, again, moving through the states. Similarly, using AI machine learning, we can do things like predicted time until next order. So we can look at individual customers and using other customer behaviors and people who've bought products like them and say, we think someone should be purchasing by now. So if someone's perhaps in an extremely likely state, we can start to look at their likelihood to buy, the revenue and so on. If someone's in an extremely likely state, what can we do from a campaign or some kind of nudge to that customer to get them to purchase again? Because again, based on their behaviors and others that look like them, again, they should be in a purchasing state by now. Of course, then we can just generate segments of that. So these are traditional segments, everything you'd be able to expect to be able to do with any platform that's collecting customer data. You can build out segments in plain text. So again, we could just say return visitors with 3 add to carts. Again, and then you can start to build segments. You can start to build campaigns off the back of that, identify those customers. Of course, we're developers and techies in the room here. Again, there is a GraphQL endpoint for this as well. So again, if I hit this here, you'll see actually my record right now. I've identified myself on a site, and then what you can get from this is then things like audiences. Now these audiences are automatically generated for me. I haven't had to define these. Again, if I define segments, they can appear in this GraphQL as well. Again, we can say customers are reachable on a channel, customers who's visited at least once a day between 28 days ago and yesterday. So again, these are now repeat customers. And we can use these insights, the automatically generated insights and the things I know about my customer profile, again, in our experimentation and personalization as part of Optimizely Web. So again, in Optimizely Web, we have the Optimizely Data Platform integration, and this does a couple of things. It will allow us to connect to the profile, again, which we have in Optimizely Data Platform. It allows us to then automatically record the events about that specific person, what's happening from an experimentation perspective, or what are they doing from anything else which is collected on the normal tracking. And then more importantly, build audiences based on these insights that we understand from our customer data. So again, if I move into the audiences section here, as you can see right now, we can start to identify customers, win-back zone customers who are churned, win-back zone customers who are engaged. We can define explicit attributes where we say the average order revenue. So again, using the data we were looking at earlier in the GraphQL, the average order revenue, say, okay, if my average order revenue is £200 or $200, or depending where you are in the world, and my current sort of order is around 100, 150, do we want to perhaps target them with an experiment on an upsell? Again, if their average order revenue was way below the current order value, again, we perhaps might want to move them along that purchase path a little bit quicker, again, to get them through to the goal of obviously conversion. But what we can do, again, taking these audiences, we can then use these audiences that we built using the data we're collecting in the Optimizely Data Platform and anything else we understand about that customer to then start to build experiments. Now, you can experiment in a number of different ways. You can actually run an experiment based on a simple split A/B, and you say actually the one that says, goes down the path A the most and converts the best is the winner. You can do a personalization campaign, where you can say, actually, I want to personalize someone's experience. So this is kind of what we think of as typical rules-based personalization. So we could say, okay, if someone's in that win-back state, how do we differentiate the experience? Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is Multi-Arm Bandit. So Multi-Arm Bandit is an experiment type that allows us to use AI machine learning to automatically favor the variations of experiences that are actually going to convert best. So in this example, what we're looking at is the free shipping, free returns, or discount to win customers back. So what we can do with this particular experiment is that we can actually say, okay, I want to target customers who are in that win-back state. So not everybody will see this. We can use the data we're collecting in the Optimizely Data Platform. We'll then be able to see that. And again, I can then target different variations of that content. So in this example here, we've got free shipping, free returns, or 10% discount. Now, again, using the Optimizely Web Editor, we can apply this onto any web estate. Again, it doesn't have to be running Optimizely Commerce Cloud. It can be running anybody who's running a shop. So as you can see here, what we've actually done is kind of really sort of hammed up that message into, free shipping with any purchase. Go and shop now. Again, we can actually have the alternative version of that, which is free returns. And again, as you can see here, free returns on everything. Or in this particular example, we've got the 10% discount. Now, what this has done is take that banner away completely. That's going to be completely hidden. And what we've done then is actually use what we call an extension. So an extension is where you can take a piece of experience, of functionality that you want to inject onto that page. And again, you can actually edit that straight on the page as well. So again, on-page editing, again, a familiar experience for people is that we can actually say, I want to go 10% off. I'm just going to type this in. As you can see right now, they'll see it updating immediately. Importantly here is that extension can then be reused and repurposed as it needs to, and that can also be obviously appearing whenever it needs to, even as part of a personalization campaign. So I'm going to move over and just show what this looks like in the experience. Okay, so moving on to the experience, we can then see how this is being applied. So I have a little extension here in Chrome, and you can actually use this yourselves if you need to. Against the optimized extensions, you can just disable that if you want to. Now I'm going to hit refresh here and see which of those experiences have been picked for me based on most likely to convert. So again, as you can see right now, funny enough, 10% off seems to be the kind of the thing that's actually going to work best for customers who are in that win-back state. Now, importantly, obviously, all this information is being collected. That has been pushed into the Optimizely data platform. So again, you can see here now, this is my actual real-life profile, an example profile that we've got. As you can see, we've got things like I've been pushed into an experiment decision. So again, we can be aware of the fact that I've gone down perhaps that discount state versus the discount bucket, versus the free shipping or free returns bucket. And again, of course, everything else I've ever done. So again, this is obviously where we're just using everything. In fact, I saw a web modal. In fact, I saw a consent. Everything that we know about me. Again, this is all being collected into the data platform. Now, importantly, all of this, again, whilst it's very interesting to look on an individual basis, this is where we can then start to feed this back and start to understand how is this affecting my company metrics, which again brings us back to where we started. Again, it's actually understanding the data, taking action on that data, experimenting and personalizing with that data, and seeing how it's affecting us positively as a business.
Thanks, David, and thanks for everyone attending.
Thanks, everybody. It was a really interesting presentation by David Bowen and David Knight. Next, we've got Scott Reed taking us through .NET 5. Just remember, keep your questions coming through the chat, and we will get to the questions along with the way. Thank you.
Obviously, everyone knows what I'm here to talk about because it's one of the big pieces of news. So moving on swiftly to the agenda. So although it's a developer session, I'm going to break this down to effectively a coverage of some core areas across what we're getting from Commerce and CMS and .NET 5 upgrade in a presentation. And then I'm going to switch over and do a bit of a .NET 5 demo, just walking through the demo software that obviously is available with the Alloy Quicksilver demo, and just show some of that code that I'm going to be talking about just as a point, so it gives everyone a bit of a flavor as a whole of what you get out of this, what is the core sort of upgrade, what's the core sort of feature sets you've got, etc. And also in the point 4, although obviously it's not coming too early next year for existing clients, a little bit of talk around getting ready for the upgrade process and for future-proofing and training over your sites to .NET 5. So I'm going to, for the .NET 5, what is .NET 5? Probably a lot of people know this. There's a little bit been covered by David as well already. So I'm just going to sort of flip through this very quickly because we hopefully all know this, but I just wanted to give a little bit of an intro. So obviously, a lot of us have been working on the core .NET framework all the way back from 2002, all the way to its evolution in 4.8. As it's been mentioned, support for this is going away, and back all the way back in 2016, Microsoft created this .NET Core 1.0 version, which had aims of cross-platform support, performance improvements, structural changes to make it a lot more modern, a lot more aligned to a lot of other development mechanisms and things we're used to. So one of the problems though was, we had .NET Framework and .NET Core running in parallel for quite a while. Then .NET Standard came about to try and unify those APIs, and it all a bit messy. And now, so it's all unified into .NET 5, which is keeping the moniker and keeping the path of .NET Core, but basically giving us all those benefits that we've talked about. So one thing that's important there, when we talk about the long-term support and as well for the roadmap of what we know, we've obviously got the .NET 5 preview and the availability for new clients that has come out as announced today. But there's limited support for .NET 5 till February next year. So obviously there's going, as mentioned, there's going to be some changes. .NET 6 is on the horizon as well, hopefully at the beginning of next year, so that when that will hit the long-term support, and then obviously we'll be building everything on .NET 6. So that's quite an important one to be aware of. Obviously, the point of .NET 5 is to create this unified platform across, all of the things you want to build: desktop, web, cloud, mobile, gaming, all of that stuff. Also, create a nice unified tooling stack across all the any of the environments you want to be building on, be it Mac, Linux, Windows, etc., and have all these command line tools that we can use in a lot more of the modern way. So there's a few benefits. Performance has already been talked about a lot, so I'll skip that. Obviously, the long-term support, very important, and moving to obviously .NET 6, and then obviously all the future. So it's Microsoft invested in it, Optimizely invested in it, so it's great to know. So moving very quickly on. So we've got CMS 12 and Commerce 14. So what were the challenges that had to happen to make this work that I'd like to just briefly mention? So obviously, for anyone who's been working with Optimizely for a long time, the admin area, we all know, legacy, web forms, it's been there for a long time. It's, a little clunky, but also on a technology which is now not supported. We've got the configuration, which is all obviously done via XML. And on that side, we've got the initialization, which obviously needs to be moved into a more modern way of how .NET Core and .NET 5 works. And then obviously a big one, there's lots of packages from third parties, but also from Optimizely that all need to be updated. And then obviously working out the best infrastructure for hosting the .NET 5, and then how to migrate existing projects. So first, I'm going to go into the demo and show it a bit more. But basically the core solution changes going through these to be aware of that I've seen from all of the examples, and the examples are going to show. First off, we're all, as developers who have been working with Alloy and working with Quicksilver, used to how to start these projects off. You either install the extension, you create your Alloy demo by creating it and going through a load of dialogues, or you clone down Quicksilver. So a big point when it comes to .NET 5 is you've got the .NET CLI, and we've got the ability to do everything on the command line, which is a lot more modern, a lot more like how things like Node.js and everything work nowadays. So it's very simple to get started with those projects that are currently available. All you have to do is effectively install the templates in the CLI from Optimizely, still labeled in some of the Episerver naming. But install those, get the CLI, create the project, and just do that for the command line. And you're up and going. You can do it very quickly. You can create that new project, have the Alloy demo or the Quicksilver demo ready to go with. It's a great one to pull down and start looking at and getting familiar with beyond what I'm going to show today when I do my demo. Really useful, and it's got some great information on it. So also we've moved away from having to use structure map. We've got dependency injection baked in now. So the dependency injection has all been moved into the basic ASP.NET dependency injection, which is great. So you don't have to worry about extra services or extra configuration. The www root now stores static website files, as I'll show in a minute. Not that important. There's not usually lots in there, but useful. The application now starts off from a program CS that initializes it, and then basically then calls the startup CS file. So that then puts it, as you see on the right-hand side here, we've got a little piece of code which is taken from the startup file, which you can see a number of pieces of configuration here for either local development, but also for setting up all of the core services, and basically all of the request pipeline, all of the services and everything that needs to happen. You can see some examples here and things we're probably all used to doing. For example, if you ever created an initialization module to configure TinyMCE, instead of doing that in an initialization module, now you can pull it out and put it in here and create a TinyMCE setup for this code, which is all very cool. And I think it's really good having it in this, a nice flow where you can see this in the startup file, which is really good. Big one that we've got is there's obviously, as we said, no configuration XML files. So things are now being moved to either JSON or handling the startup. So you've got things like the app settings.json, which has some configuration areas for maybe logging or local connection strings, or extra configuration if you need it. But a lot of the configuration is now being done basically in code at this startup point. So the startup file, as you see, is development, but you can also query this to see which environment it's on. So if you need to swap out and change how some of the services work, say you've got, say you're using Azure Identity and you want to only have that when you're on the DXP, you can do that, set that up. Local development could still use ASP.NET or something like that. So you can really customize that in the code, and you can really see that. It's really cool. So the other one we've got there is the bundling. Although a lot of stuff has been moved into code, whereas bundling used to be code, now in the examples, the bundling configuration is all handled in a bundle config that I will show in a second. And as mentioned, I've put links at the bottom left of all my slides to core and pieces of information, and they are summarized at the end, so when you get these slides. But basically, that's where you can go to get the NetCore preview, and this has the demos for CMS 12 and Commerce 14, and so play with them, use them, and there's feedback on GitHub. But obviously, there's the ability to now use it in a real scenario now. So a couple of little bits about what you get from effectively the editing and the user interface, and what we can see as developers that is great, and also what we can sell to clients, what we can talk about, which is really cool, is the user interface and editing. The dashboard and the reports area is gone. Dashboard is an area where a lot of people don't tend to use a lot, but there are some core gadgets and stuff that a lot of people might have used, such as the 404 handler, which is a gadget item you put in there, and a lot of people use it for 404s. So at the moment, as we mentioned, when it comes to packages, they are still going to have to wait until a lot of packages, if and when they are ported over. So things like the 404 manager will need to be ported over. They've already seen such as a logging plugin that was recently talked about on the blogs that has already been ported over as an admin extension, in the same way that you would create the extra areas inside the editor interface, which is really cool. The admin area, and this is something we've waited for ages, because we talked about the fact that they were all web forms, has all been rewritten. It's really cool. You've got the access rights to schedule job management, configuration, and all of your tooling, managing of the websites and the languages. Some of these have been enhanced. I like the fact that Scheduled Jobs has had some of the features of one of the Scheduled Jobs packages, which was a Scheduled Job Manager, which now tells you the frequency and gives you a little bit of graph of how long it's run, etc. Gives a bit of performance on it, which is quite useful. But that's in there now. To be aware that there are a couple of areas that haven't been ported over yet. I've had a talk with Martin around some of these areas. So we've got managed content and convert pages. So managed content is something that's been useful when it comes to building extensions. Sometimes you have these, like shadow nodes that you create under the global node, and you need to check permissions. You need to delete them if you need to recreate non-initialization modules. So currently, the managed content where you could see that isn't there. I'm told it's probably going to be ported over, and convert pages hasn't been ported over. So convert pages was obviously useful in some scenarios if you needed to make a new type and you needed to convert some existing content. But on the whole, it's a really good update for this, and it will make the experience for the editors, the admin editors, a lot better. And because obviously dashboards, reports are gone, GUI plugin, page plugin, those sort of ones have been deprecated and removed. And obviously there's some support for, as mentioned, this, David's already mentioned some of this, but the JS frameworks in the front end sort of libraries now that can make this a lot better for creating the editing experience and consuming experience of these frameworks, etc. So commerce, a couple of things to be aware of. There's now, as some people have already mentioned, Commerce Manager, which was one of the biggest pain points for a long time, has now been removed. So although some areas have been migrated, so you've got markets, warehouses, catalogs, tax configurations, etc. It's basic, and shipping and payments. You have to be aware of that. Basically, some areas such as importing, exporting catalogs, adding countries and regions, some currency management, business object configuration and meta classes, they've actually been dropped, and there isn't an admin interface at the moment. So these need to be configured by the API. So one area that is interesting to look at inside the commerce demo, the Quicksilver demo that you can get obviously from GitHub, is that there's some migration code there which migrates and configures and creates a lot of this stuff in there, which is quite interesting. But you obviously have to create codes to be able to configure any customization. So if you're used to, adding extra stuff into business objects for storing stuff, you obviously have to move that into code now. And officially, membership as one of the dependencies is dropped. So when you're working with the .NET 5 as a whole, you'll have to migrate everything to ASP.NET Identity. Obviously, that should be a big job. Khan has a long time ago done a blog post on migrating. So if you haven't done it, it's fairly easy, and you can keep all of your passwords as well, which is very useful. And so a little bit about the digital experience platform. So one thing that it was mentioned that there's going to be provisioning for DXP. So one thing to be aware of is the new .NET 5 stuff is primarily going to be moving to Linux web apps over there. That has an inherent knock on that some of the maintenance page configuration isn't going to be there to start off with, because of the way maintenance page is configured with the standard IIS approach. I'm told it will come, but it's not going to be there supported at first, from what I'm told. This will require, as mentioned, new Azure provisioning. So if you are migrating a client or moving them over, so just be aware that you're going to be creating new Azure provisioning. So your Azure, your DevOps pipelines and your configuration and deployment API, all of your configuration and access, you'll get new environments for that. You'll have to switch that over, and you'll have to be aware of that. Obviously, we've mentioned configs have gone, so config transforms are one thing that we won't have anymore. The files that we talked about that were JSON, such as the app settings, they will just have basically an integration pre-prod or production suffix at the end, and it will load whichever is the actual one for that environment. So there's no more worrying about basically transformation processes as you push these up the tree, up the pipeline from integration pre-prod to production. And one other thing is the deployment API is required. So although I've been told the integration can be pushed to pre-prod and prod when it comes to the PaaS portal, you have to deploy the code as a package up into integration. So as a point of obviously getting ready, be aware that you need to do that, and you'll have to switch over to basically the deployment API mechanism. Again, it's linked to the bottom. It's not actually that difficult, but there are some nuances around that. But the removal of config transforms will make it a little bit easier, which is cool. So before I go into my demo, and show a little bit of the actual code. So what's on the roadmap? We've got the .NET 5 release at the moment. We've got the .NET 6 update coming end of year, early next year for the long-term support, which goes all the way through to 2024, I think. And then obviously, at the moment, some of the documentation for the .NET 5 release has some broken links, and it's a bit spotty in some areas. I assume that's on the way that's going to be improved and made a lot better. Obviously, we're expecting, Optimizely are working hard on the supporting packages that are going to be supported for this one, but they're also the third-party packages. Most partners and developers will have to update themselves. So hopefully there'll be some drive to do that. I know people like Valdis and Getter already are hot on updating some of their packages. The re-adding of the admin features that I mentioned aren't there at the moment, which is still fairly useful. And obviously, the rebranding as of a very recent version has now come about, and the rebranding now exists in there. And you'll see it when I quickly show my demo. So, moving swiftly on to what people actually want to see most of. So, hopefully everyone can see this. Yep, cool. So I'm just going to run through a couple of the parts that I mentioned here and just go through them a little bit and explain them. So as we talked about, now the start of the application initialization comes in the program. So program starts all of the conventions. That is some of the stuff we'd be familiar from, obviously standard, ASP.NET Core and 5. But basically the core thing here is this web builder use startup, which jumps straight into our basically startup class. So in the startup class and this configure services, that's the one we saw on my presentation example. So this is the area where you can really do all of your key customization. So for example, we've got all of the is development here. We can turn the scheduler off so that we know that locally it's not on, but on an environment like the DXP, it's always enabled. The configuration here for the connection strings. There's core areas of services for, obviously from the core libraries for enabling all of the ASP.NET configuration. Obviously, as we said, web config is gone, configuration needs to come in here. Basically, as you go through this, you'll see all of the standard MVC configuration and setup. You'll see the areas that set up Alloy. We're all familiar with things like display options, etc. They are traditionally configured in, again, initialization modules, but these are all now configured in here. So you can see like adding Alloy, adding your display resolutions. If you want to customize your tiny MCE configuration, you've got this in here as that extension. So basically where you might have thought before, initialization modules, very cool, put them in, I'm gonna target that. Now you have to move to this. Initializable module is still in the framework and it's still there, and I think it's more for compatibility at the moment. But some of the dependencies that you could put in, such as there was a dependency to the TinyMC initialization that you would put above your class declaration, that is now gone. So I know that people have tried to continue to use initialization modules in .NET 5 and it's not worked. So most of these should be ported over to here, and I believe it's best to put everything in here and move it into a nice place you can see all of this stuff. And then obviously your standard configuration, setting up your exception pages, etc., those sorts of areas, things again we don't have in the web config side, setting up your routing, etc., that sort of stuff. So moving on from the startup file, some of the areas I mentioned, we've got the app settings config here. So this is some of the local login configuration. If you have local connection strings, you can put them in there and load them in there as well. That's that sort of process. You could put your own configuration in this, and then you could load that out. The bundle config now has some of the information here, which is a lot more like what you'd expect to see in bits like Node and other frameworks, where this is all configured here. This is a benefit for obviously front-end developers who are used to working with it. In the past, I've had to train people in how to set up your bundling configuration in C# code. So it's very useful to have this here as well in an easier way for some of the more modern development. One area I didn't mention, but where we're used to using effectively your block controllers before, and setup has a little bit of a change in the configuration. So we've now got this block component. This has changed a little bit over the last couple of versions. This was in Invoke and it's now Invoke component. But basically, it's very similar to how it worked before, but has been slightly changed. But again, look at the code, but you become familiar with it yourself. And so moving on to, this is now the startup for, if you haven't looked at the demo, the Netcore preview demo is separated into the MVC and the commerce. So looking at the startup for commerce, we then have a lot more configuration as you'd expect. We've got things such as basically market configuration in here for some of the market services. We have basically a lot more information for some of the stuff that you would normally be configuring for commerce, and also some Kestrel configuration. Basically, a lot more of the commerce configuration and information you'd want in here. And I briefly mentioned it, but you've also got this migration step here that is here, which has a lot of information and code that you can look at for basically setting up some of the warehouses, configuring your payment methods in code, configuring shipping methods, and basically migrating and moving over a load of information, which is useful for obviously anything you want to do programmatically or migrating content over. And that comes from some exported data that's inside the app data. So I think that's probably enough for that. And very briefly, just to see what this looks like, we've now got the nice branded Optimizely logo and login. This now logs in, and where you see here, this is the admin area as we talked about, very nice and shiny. Scheduled jobs, as mentioned, has this now graph which shows you the history and the overview of how it's running. Everything's a lot cleaner, slicker, as it was mentioned by David. It's run a lot better as well, being on .NET 5 as well. But obviously, it's also been updated to be on front end first and very clean. So it's all very nice and slick. So moving back into my demo. The next is just a little bit about preparing and future-proofing. So it was mentioned, but basically, if you go into the world documentation, you'll see talk about an upgrade assistant. I know people like I know one of the MVPs, Darren, has already started using this, and I think a few people have touched on it. But basically, the Upgrade Assistant is a Microsoft CLI tool which you can run, and it can give you basically go through all of the steps as you see here of creating backups, trying to convert, trying to give you advice, updating NuGet packages, and then basically trying to auto convert and give you advice of the upgrade. It uses MS Build, and it's a command line tool. There is also an Optimize the Upgrader, but at the moment the documentation in World that links to it goes to a secure page you've got to sign into, which I haven't got access to, so hoping to get more information on that. But basically, your projects need to compile, and there's a number of command line switches when you run this. So I haven't used this too much myself, but it's just an important thing to know about for when you want to talk about existing projects. So next is just going to be, I've talked about some of these, but I just want to run through, the mentality of upgrading and migrating a project over that you've got existing, because we're all going to have lots of clients on it, and they're all going to be really capable of doing, and they're really going to be wanting this to migration, these benefits of the performance, etc. So what do you have to think about? Connection strings, logging, move these over to the app settings if you need to, or obviously the settings within having the DXP if it's not local. This will just pull this stuff over. Move all of your config initialization to startup, get rid of things that are initialization modules where you can, move everything over, move everything that's configured in any web config that you need to do, set up any modules, any custom packages you've got into that startup file. Rewrite any web-based components you've got. So if you've got anything that, albeit, we all don't like web forms nowadays, or most people like, MVC and web forms are very old school. If you've got anything in there, you have to rewrite it. So one point of this is, if you look in, I've looked inside all the packages, and one pain point was the optimize the forms was always done with ASCX controls, and now this has been migrated to be CS/HTML files. So one thing is, a lot of people tend to customize this, put extra accessibility things in it, and often people have overridden this and extracted it and changed it. So now this is now refreshed, so you want to pull this back over, add any customizations that you need, unless you changed it to CS/HTML when you moved it over. But you obviously still want to look for a refresh, because it's likely changed quite a bit. Obviously, the DI framework, as you mentioned, all been replaced to the ASP.NET default. So, obviously, look at the examples, migrate where you need to. If there's any problems, you might have to change, look into some of the more complex stuff if you've done any complex areas, but the DI framework's pretty good. And there's a big change to the routing system where it moved over now. So you just basically have a look at that and make sure that your routing all works, and configure that, change it over, get rid of any ASP.membership if you have it, and move that all over to obviously ASP.identity. There's no support now for the old school CMS search, so everything should now be moved to a different search implementation, such as search and navigation. So you want to obviously move all of that over. Commerce, obviously handle any of those updates that we talked about to the removed areas. They all need to be through the API configuration. On the right here, you can see all of those areas, so you can have a look at some of the example code in the commerce implementation, and then obviously build your own code to set that up and configure it, add in your own meta fields and configurations where you need to. Move all of that config file information to the startup. Handle removal of some of the payment. There's basically some of the payment classes don't implement authorized net, so they have been removed. So there's some removal of payment classes that need to be handled on this. Solar support's been removed, so obviously again everything to search and navigation, and some of the core ASP.NET types don't support binary serialization. So if you've got any of those where you are serializing them onto, carts or areas, you might just have to look at that and change some of that around. And then there's not a lot of changes when it comes to search and navigation, but now obviously everything needs to be initialized and done in the startup. So configure it. There's a whole load of classes and settings for setting up how this conventions and how everything will work. At the moment, there's not support for looking inside Word, PDFs, and previewing information into that. But obviously, hopefully that will come. And then packages, obviously, as you mentioned, third-party packages, you have to be aware that a lot of them might not be updated yet. So if you're looking to migrate a project over or to use packages in a new build that you aren't sure supported, you'll have to wait for those. You might have to look at other ways of doing things if you want to migrate stuff over, and wait till those developers have pushed those changes and those updates. So yes, BVM 404 handler, as I said, we just had the shout out there. A lot of people using it, very popular package there. So, hopefully that'll get updated and support soon, but there's obviously a large amount of useful packages. I think we've all used so many of the Getter packages in our tool stack as well. So, hopefully those guys are heavy at it. Packages that use the dashboard, as you mentioned, the 404 handler, and then obviously the form package has those changes to CSHTML. So, just be aware of all of that information. And finally, the coverage of that DSP and infrastructure. So integration needs to be deployed to via the deployment API. So for your existing clients where you've got your pipelines, if you aren't doing that and you're doing web publishes or even whole bit FTP deployments, you'll have to migrate that over. So, you can do that now. You can get going straight away. There's no point in, holding off on migrating your pipelines over and, setting all this stuff up. Handle those config transforms, push everything to the startup, check for your environment variables, all of that, so you can deploy stuff and check for integration, pre-prod reduction where you need to, whereas before we would have done config transforms. Be aware that there's new provisioning required. So, talk to customers, work it out, and then do that migration. And then obviously handle the lack of maintenance support. You could use Smooth Deploy, for example. Obviously, there's that issue with the write mode where, you're going to lose some of the changes in the interim. So depending on your scenarios, you could use Smooth Deploy or we can wait for the maintenance support. And the other big one there is just as a throw out in the end there is IS specific web config settings. Loads of us have always used things like IS rewrite, redirects to be able to redirect to your sort of HTTP to HTTPS. Obviously that doesn't exist anymore. There's no web config in there. We're moving to Linux apps, so you have to use things like the core pipe, some of the stuff that's built into ASP.NET and configure those in code, etc. for that. And then any of the other stuff that you're used to using, such as reverse proxying and stuff like that, those sorts of things, you have to look at and migrate. Anything that you have is, IS. But I'm sure there'll be lots of blogs and information coming out. And finally, all of the stuff that I have seen, all the blogs that I think are useful, all the breakdowns, Mark's breakdown, my breakdown, a load of other ones that are in the blogs, testing with CMS 12. I've linked all here, so when you get those slides, you can just go through these and pull out all that information very quickly. Cool, and that's it. Hopefully I didn't go too far over. I know this is a bit of a broad overview, but hopefully it helps everyone to get a bigger picture of the entire point of the upgrade. Obviously, everyone knows what I'm here to talk.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. That was a great update on .NET 5 from Scott. We are now about to be joined by Dean Barker, who will be taking us through some updates on headless. Let me quickly check the chat if we got any questions. Hi, so we got, Dean, how are you?
I'm good. It's late here. Hi, everybody. Happy to be here.
All right, so I'll just throw the screen back to you, Dean, if that's okay.
Yeah, I have it. That should be my screen. Awesome. Good day, everyone. It's evening here, but good day to you. I am the Senior Director of Content Management, Research, Evangelism, Strategy here in the product team at Optimizely. And my experience has been in content management. And I'm here to talk to you a bit about our plans for headless in the future. Obviously, headless is a massive shift and inflection point in the market. So we are doing several things to address this. And what I'm going to do, just a quick agenda. I don't have a lot of time to talk. I'm just going to go for about 20 minutes. I'm going to spend a bit framing headless. I'm going to put headless in perspective as how we look at headless deals. When headless deals come in, obviously we evaluate a lot of them, and we have kind of learned to categorize them based on what customers are looking for, even if customers don't realize that they're kind of segregating to one sort of flavor of headless, and I'll explain that. In addition to that, I'm going to rant for a bit. I've become like the grouchy old man of CMS, and I'm going to go on a bit of a rant, and I hope you'll tolerate that because there is a larger point. I'm going to talk about what I'm calling the race to the middle, which is a big market shift that we're seeing. And then at the end, I will give you some actionable information on our future headless plans. We have some exciting things that we're doing, and I'll tell you where those fit in. But first of all, what I want to do is give you a little bit of background on what we call the two lenses of headless. I call these lenses because they're what people are viewing headless through. When people come to us and they talk about headless, they really are looking through one of two different lenses. They have one or two different perspectives on it, and they may not even know that the other perspective exists. And the first perspective, the first lens that people look at headless through is what I'm calling downstream templating. And what I mean by downstream templating is we're slowly moving templating closer to the end user. We used to template upstream in the repository, and then we used to template midstream in the web server. And now we've moved templating all the way down to the browser, and we can't really get it any closer unless we learn to template like on somebody's retina or something. We can't really get any closer to the user than the browser they're using. So this is steadily moving templating downstream. These are people who want to template websites in what we're calling rich client templating systems like React or Vue or what have you. These are JavaScript DOM-based templating systems. These people are still building websites. They really just want to swap out how they template that website. And this is what I would call a front-end perspective. These people are looking for a benefit of headless on the front end. They're looking for it on the glass that like the user is seeing, very, very close to the user. The keys to this lens is they want all the existing stuff that we already do. Remember, these people are still building websites. They need all of the tools, all of the modeling, aggregation, URL management, all of the things that we normally do. They just want to template it differently. They're looking for first request server-side rendering. Obviously, you make your first request into an application, you need to bootstrap the app. So they need server-side rendering that first request to make it fast before the app bootstraps. They need a strong content delivery API. And they're also looking for, whether they realize this or not, sometimes they don't articulate, but we read through the lines, they're looking to distribute their development load. Right now, our system is fairly monolithic. You template the system in Razor, and you work in C# and you work in Visual Studio, and you kind of deploy it as a big monolith. And they're really looking to break that up. They have front-end developers that they want to be able to push some of the workload off. And we have some things that we're doing that might equalize that later on. But these are people who want to do downstream rich client-side templating. And then the second lens are people who want to do a content hub, what we're calling. They want to store their content without any presentation. So they want to be able to reuse content in other channels, and they're looking for a CMS as the central repository for content. And these are people I would say have a back-end perspective. The benefit they want to get for headless is really on the back end, the architecture level. What these people really want are very, very strong content modeling, strong editorial workflow tools, things like versioning and compare and things like that. And then they want content management API and integration options. So they want to be able to push content into the CMS from multiple different places, and they want all sorts of ways of getting content out of the CMS. What's interesting about these two lenses is virtually every deal that we come in sits in one of these different buckets and is also completely ignorant of the other one. And I'm not saying the people are ignorant of it, but they don't have any concept of doing that. People who come to us and want to template and React, they're not really thinking about a content hub type situation. And people who want a content hub are not really thinking about templating and React. They may not even know what React is. I think, honestly, in the 2 years I've been here, I've only seen one opportunity that really did straddle both sides of this. And so how we approach those deals and how you should approach those deals are very, very different. What I'm going to talk about mainly today is that first one, this downstream templating, because what I'm seeing in the marketplace is really frustrating for me in that pure headless vendors have managed to steal the narrative. And what they're saying is that you need a pure headless system to template with React or whatever system you choose. And I want to break that narrative up. You really don't need a pure headless CMS to build a rich templated website. In fact, you are probably doing your customer a disservice. Remember, if you're templating in React, you're still building a website, and you still need a lot of the tools and to solve a lot of the problems that we have solved in building websites. We have a lot of tools for doing it. And just because you want to template it differently doesn't mean we need to throw away 20 years of experience of solving problems on the web. I wrote this article. I'll put the link for the article in the chat later on. We didn't publicize this article too much. It's out there and you can read it. We didn't pass it around on social media. There was some fear that it made us sound a little bit defensive. I was a little angry when I wrote it. I think I was like 2 beers in when I wrote this. You can read it if you like, but I tell the story in this of a customer that came to us and they had built their website on a very popular leading headless vendor. And they were gracious enough to show us the back end of their headless application. So they logged into their headless system and they shared a desktop with us, and they kind of walked us through what they did. And they were very talented and they had done a lot of work on it. But I was still a little more horrified as the demo went on, because they had spent so much time rebuilding so many things that really all already exist in a CMS. They spent an enormous amount of time, for example, coming up with schemes to manage their navigation. Well, I mean, we've been doing that for years. We have tools built into our system, things like content tree and link collections to manage navigation. And they had rigged up a system to enable them to preview changes, which we do natively. And there's just an enormous amount of weird work that they did. And I wrote this article. Again, I'll put a link in the chat. You can read it if you like. This is a quote from the article. If you're using React to template a website, you still have URLs, you still have pages, you still have page composition, you still need to visually embed media, link from page to page, you still want to preview web pages. You still have a website, and we have a whole bundle of solutions to solve those problems that we really don't want you to throw away just because you want to template it differently. Client-side templating should really just be a preference, and in saying just to be a preference, I don't want to minimize it. I mean, that's a significant change in how we build websites. But at the end of the day, we need to get to a situation where you can simply swap a new templating system in and take advantage of all the functionalities that we still offer. I feel like the tail wags the dog a little bit when people are basing their CMS selection, they're basing their entire content management architecture on how they want to template their website. I think that's a little short-sighted. And I think that's making a very large-scale decision for a very, very specific thing. And we can probably do better as a vendor in supporting different templating paradigms. And I think we can do better in communicating this to customers. This is where I'm going to rant a little bit. And the reason for that is there's a big trend we're seeing in the headless market, which drives me a little bit up the wall. And the big trend that we're seeing is this idea of website builders. Several of our kind of pure headless competitors have come out with website builders. And these are a series of screen caps I took just from various competitor websites. I don't identify anybody here, but a lot of pure headless vendors that for years and years sanctimoniously rejected the notion of a web page and said, well, we just manage content, we don't manage pages. Well, now they've decided they need to manage pages. Down there in the bottom right is a really funny one. That's one of our competitors. And this was the Drift bot that popped up when I was on their website. And I just love the quote there. What once seemed impossible is now here. You can easily build and manage your websites while still enjoying the benefits of a headless CMS. And I just think that's like hilarious. Obviously, you can easily build and manage a website on Content Cloud, and you have been able to do that for 20 years. Additionally, I was doing headless projects with Content Cloud back in 2011, 2012. We've officially had a headless API since 2015. So I feel like the confused girl from the meme. It's like when they talk about these website builders and they talk about all this stuff, I'm just like, really? This is new information for you guys? We've been doing this for years. And this is what I'm really calling the race to the middle. If you look at a spectrum, and on the left side of the spectrum, I have really pure website builders, which admittedly we were at one time. I mean, we were a web CMS fundamentally. And then on the right, we have kind of headless API, so a pure headless API with no presentation component. Well, we saw the headless wave coming, so people were doing headless work with Episerver, the original Episerver CMS, years ago, but we added a headless API in 2015, and we've built it. It's on version 3 now, I think. And we just added a content management API this year. And we have a content definitions API as well. I mean, we have really headless enabled the platform enormously. Well, headless vendors, they saw that it was getting tougher for them to land deals. And so they've now come out with website builders because their customers were kind of rebuilding all these ways to manage websites on headless CMS. So they thought, well, let's take advantage of that market and let's release some tools to do that. And so essentially we've both like ended up in the same place, and we've kind of raced to the middle. And fundamentally, headless vendors are backing their way into the market that we've been in all along. I mean, our benefit is we've been there for 20 years and we have an incredibly mature content management foundation, and we're not reinventing and resolving content problems. We've solved them 20 years ago. There's a great book about blue ocean marketing. And in the marketing world, blue ocean marketing is when you create your own category. That's the goal of every kind of product development company, is to create your own category in which you compete with no one. The ocean is yours. It's wide and it's blue, and you're not competing with anybody. And you can go out and get all these deals. Well, this is what headless vendors did when they popped up 7, 8, 9 years ago, right? They had a blue ocean. Nobody was doing this, and it was very new and very interesting. But eventually, unfortunately, the ocean generally turns red, and other people join you in your blue ocean, and you suddenly start catching all the fish there are to catch, and you have to venture into other parts of the ocean for deals. And so what we see is we didn't used to see headless vendors at all because there were people who just wanted pure headless systems, and we were not talking to those people. Well, those people have maybe been sucked up by the market, and we're running into headless vendors more and more and more. And so headless vendors are having to compete with us on our terms in many cases. And so this is what you're seeing in this big inflection in the market of them moving into presentation management, which is something that they swore they would never do. And I love this quote from The Dark Knight. You either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain. And I think that accurately sums up the headless market. You see a lot of headless vendors today really becoming the thing that they swore they were the alternative to. If you go back 7, 8 years ago, they were swearing they would never do what they're doing today, and they're doing it because they're having to compete with us on our terms. So that was my rant, and I hope you appreciated that. I'm going to finish up by telling you kind of exactly what our plans are about headless probably through the end of next year. We have several different initiatives underway. The first thing is sort of wrapped up in our .NET 5 release, which I know a lot of people have been talking about. For .NET 5, what we have done is we have taken our content modeling UI out of admin mode, which admittedly has been neglected. And the reason why it's been neglected is because we really moved to a code-first modeling approach. Well, in this brave new world, obviously the market is tending back towards modeling from a UI. So we have a new content modeling UI in the .NET 5 release, and we have a PRD floating around right now moving forward to improve our validation options for that. We went and surveyed a lot of the vendors in the market, and we determined what we were going to have to offer from a content modeling UI to achieve parity with them. And this next version of the content modeling UI will give you opportunities to, from the UI, set up things like unique constraints and ranges, like a date has to be between 2 ranges or in the future, regular expression, pattern matching, and all those things to let you actually do more modeling from the UI rather from code. And that also plays into another thing, which I'll talk about in just a second. Additionally, we are making some improvements to edit mode to more natively support headless content. Right now, clearly, we have edit mode as a very web-centric UI, and it gets a little confused when the content that you are trying to edit does not have a presentation component. We do suppress on-page edit mode, but we still show some things that we shouldn't. Like there's an presentation mode, and there's options that have to do with content that has a visual rendering component, which headless content wouldn't. And additionally, we are going to introduce the concept of what we're calling native headless content. If you're a developer on this call, you understand that content in Content Cloud extends from a common base. There's content base, and that extends into, there's content data, which extends into page data, block data, and media data. We are actually going to introduce a pure content that is not a page, it's not a block, it's not media, it's just literally managed content in the system. You can actually do this now. You can actually manage content based purely on content data. I actually believe the object is basic content. I have a sample in a GitHub gist. I'll put in the chat. You can take a look at it. But you can manage content now. You can actually set up completely separate root for it and manage content in that root. And this content is easily managed in Content Manager as well. We just need the UI to more effectively support this. So our goal is that in addition to the page tree, you'll have a content tree, which is just for pure content. It's not a page, not a block. It's just content that is available via the Headless API or via the C# API. Additionally, we are going to support GraphQL. We have a GraphQL engine that's in a private beta now. We're hoping to expand that beta by the end of the year. And what's exciting about GraphQL is it's really becoming an accepted protocol for communication. And so there's a whole ecosystem of tools that work with GraphQL. And if we become GraphQL fluent, then suddenly we will open ourselves up to this wonderful ecosystem of other tools, things like Gatsby and Next.js and the PWA builders that people are doing. It just really requires us to speak GraphQL, and we are well down the road to being able to do that. We're going to make improvements to the content management API. We released that in Q1. The biggest improvement it's going to make is to extend it to media management. One of the compromises we made for the first release is you can't actually manage media with it, but we are going to extend that to media management. So those are coming. And then we have plans on the books to do some template abstraction. And I'm going to explain what we're going to do here and then why it relates to headless, because it might not be immediately apparent why it relates to headless. But right now, our system is very C# centric. You template in Razor, which is just transpiled C#. You template directly in the Visual Studio project. So after launch, if you need to change how a certain tag renders or something, you really have to change a CS/HTML file and then redeploy the entire solution, which is just wildly, wildly inefficient. We are going to introduce an alternative template engine. This will be an option. You don't have to use it, but we're hoping to offer templating in Liquid. Liquid is a very popular templating language, which was developed by Shopify, and it's becoming something of a standard. I don't know if there is a standard templating language, but Liquid is becoming very, very popular. And additionally, our goal is to allow you to manage your templates in an entirely separate DevOps process. So if you do need to change how something renders after a site is launched, you wouldn't be opening up Visual Studio, recompiling the project and deploying that. You would simply be changing some templates in another repository somewhere and maybe clearing a template cache. And this goes back to my earlier point about distribution of load. Our goal is that templating could be done by a front-end developer who does not know C# and who does not have access to Visual Studio and is templating in their favorite IDE using a non-C# based templating language and submitting those templates through another deployment process. Also, I just have a personal note here. There is a new paradigm coming out that some people are calling HTML as a service. Traditionally, when we talk about headless and client-side rendering, what we're talking about is contacting the server for JSON, which we then use to populate client-side components. There is a new paradigm that I feel like has legs and is gaining steam, where instead of getting JSON back to the server, you just get fragments of HTML, and you dynamically update the DOM by replacing fragments of HTML. Basecamp, the project management system, that runs purely on HTML as a service. They actually don't exchange JSON with their server. They exchange actually HTML. And if we were to enable template building and template abstraction through a non-C# based language, this would really be quite possible and quite attractive for teams with a lot of front-end developers. Front-end developers, you would deploy your Visual Studio project maybe once, and then all of your other changes would be done at the templating level through another DevOps process. So we're excited about that. We think we're discussing deployment models for that. I'm actually very much in favor of open sourcing this. I think the community could really coalesce around this and do some neat things with it. So we're talking about how to deploy that, but I hope to have a proof of concept written for that by the end of this year. Then companion hosting accounts. One of the things about headless is you still have a head, right? You still have an application, a React application, or a set of files that make up an application that you need to host somewhere. What we would like to do is enable you to have more than one hosting account under a DXC account. So your DXC account would have a Content Cloud instance, but then it would have also a separate hosting account. And that might be running Node or maybe ASP.NET MVC. Hopefully it would be containerized so you can kind of deploy whatever you want. And that's where you could place your head, essentially. So you could serve up your Gatsby generated site or something from there, and then it could talk to a Content Cloud instance that's running in a separate hosting account. And then finally, we would like to develop an omni-product webhooking service. Webhooks are a key integration system when you don't actually have access to write integration code, and then this kind of no-code, low-code future. Ideally, we would like to get to a point where you have to deploy the solution less often than you do now. And so we are planning and architecting a omni-product event bus. So any product in the suite, be it Content Cloud, Commerce Cloud, B2B commerce, B2C commerce, content intelligence, optimize the full stack, whatever, can raise an event in the event bus. And then that event could issue a webhook call and communicate back a response to that call. Clearly, we could have built this into CMS. We could have built this into Content Cloud more easily. But we think this is something that really should be done at the platform level and should be an omni-product feature. And so clearly that takes quite a bit more thought and architecture, but we're hoping to deliver that sometime next year. So these are the future things we are doing. There's a lot of activity around headless in the organization. I want you to know we take the paradigm very, very seriously. And I'm gonna make this statement here. Our position is really headless should be a feature, not a foundation. And in saying that, I'm not trying to minimize headless functionality. It is very important. It is a huge change. It's one of the biggest changes, biggest shifts in the content management market in the last decade for sure. But we don't think your desire for a headless API should dictate your choice of CMS. We support headless APIs to the same extent as pure headless vendors. And we also bring a wealth of experience and tools and features and wisdom and lessons learned from 20 years of being in this space. So we think headless should absolutely be a feature of the product going forward. It's not really a foundation of the product. It'll simply be expected. It'll simply be added to the product over time. And we can finally get back to talking about things like editorial workflow, things that really matter and really change our customers' value proposition over time. Okay, I have rambled now for about 20 minutes. That's all I had. This is my email address. I would love to hear from you directly. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. Please feel free to email me. I would love to talk to you about anything having to do with Content Cloud. And with that, I will throw it back to our illustrious hosts. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks for sticking around this time of the day for you there. Very informative session. I'm pretty sure that everybody took a lot away from your rants, or what you call rants. Very informative. Thank you. All right. Just bear with me, everybody. I'm just grab my screen back up again. Okay, so next we have our partners from Made to Engage, Johnny and Mark, talking us through Optimizely Experiment and focusing on full stack for feature flags. And stick around for the session after that, where we're going to hear from Cody and Joey about the OMVP program and some updates on certification.
So, hi everyone. Thanks for coming to our presentation on getting started with Optimizely Experiments. I'm really excited to present today, and I really hope that you find the content we covered today useful. So, firstly, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Johnny. I'm a technical architect at Made to Engage. Made to Engage are a Gold Optimizely partner based in the UK and Ireland. I have over 12 years experience with the Episerver/Optimizely platforms, working with integration partners across Australia and Europe as well. I'm currently based in Dublin in Ireland. So I love working with clients to understand their business and help design technical solutions to help them meet their goals. So I'm a techie at heart, so I'm passionate about kind of good code and love to kind of get my hands dirty writing and reviewing code. So Mark Everard is an Optimizely OMVP. He's a technical director at Made to Engage. Unfortunately, he can't make this run of the presentation, so you could call it a little bit of an experiment, probably with one of us running through it. So I'll be very happy if you can get the following out of the presentation. So firstly, we're going to cover feature flags and experiments, as well as do a brief product overview on Optimizely. We then begin to do a working example on Optimizely Commerce Cloud, where we will install, configure, and code up our first experiment. And then right at the end, we're going to look at a real-world example and look at the real-world results and see what that meant to that particular client. So what are feature flags and experiments? So feature flags are effectively where you wrap different versions of your code in conditional statements that you can turn on and off at will. So to give you the potential to separate your release code from the rollout of the feature on your website. So you can also roll out into smaller segments of your audience, and you can even roll out your feature in kind of smaller controlled phases to parts of your audience, so you don't have to go with everybody getting the feature at the same time. So use well, and as part of your process, it gives you the opportunity to do more regular release cycles. It gives you greater quality control and also kind of rapid rollback plans as well. Experiments are a feature basically which come on top of feature flags. So experiments allow you to measure the success of various variations of your feature in the context of whatever the goal is. So effectively it is running A/B tests on the feature you switched on with actual visitors to determine what works best. So a really simple example might be if you have an email sign-up feature that you turn on. You might want to A/B test 3 different variations of that email sign-up feature with different copy and different imagery, for example. And you may want to then measure the success to see which version of the email sign-up is generating the most email sign-ups. And that's effectively then the version that you will probably go with and roll out to your wider audience. So Optimizely has a number of products to meet your feature flag and experimentation requirements. So firstly, we'll discuss web A/B testing. So web A/B testing, we're not going to cover in this presentation, but at the same time, I just want to make you aware of what this product is. It's a product for running client-side experiments that are executed by JavaScript in the browser. So a developer creates the JS snippets using the Optimizely client-side API. They can log into Optimizely and add these snippets, which are then consumed into the website. There's no release required for this, and it's great for kind of really quick, lightweight tests. So, for example, a good example of this would be, let's say you're considering adding a wish list feature to your e-commerce site, but you're unsure how well it will, or how many of your customers will actually interact. So you could build your bit of JavaScript to add this wish list button to the DOM, and that on click of that wish list, it might return a coming soon message, and it's very low cost then. But you're going to get data very early for how you can measure. Data to help you measure how useful this feature would be to your audience and the level of interaction. So it's very valuable in determining the cost benefit of proceeding with larger features of development. Today, we're going to focus on full stack. So full stack is server-side experiments which are added to backend code. It's very powerful, and it's going to support more advanced experiments than web A/B testing. There's also some very good integrations with the Optimizely Commerce Cloud. Now, this is more likely to require a release, obviously, to get your feature out there because you are adding it to the backend code. We're going to focus on this today, and we're going to look at a working example. Lastly, and we're going to talk about rollouts. So rollouts is what we will be working through today. It's a scaled back version of Optimizely Full Stack. The same integration applies as Full Stack. So what we cover for one product and the code base we are going to implement for one product covers both. So effectively, you can think of it as the same product, but just maybe missing a few features. So Optimizely rollouts. First thing is a rollout account is free. You can sign up here on optimizely.com/free-feature-flagging. It lets you out of the box manage feature flags and manage multiple. You can configure and run experiments, as well as have the reporting tools to measure the success of your experiments. Now, being a free plan, there are some limitations. The first one is you are allowed one active experiment on each environment. That could turn into a big limitation when you see how useful experimentation can be to your future roadmap. Bot filtering is also not available. So meaning that bot requests are included in experiments. So although you'll see the patterns and be well able to determine what variation of the experiment is the winner, it can skew reports, especially if you want stats on things like average order value, etc. So, and there's an experiments REST API that's also not available. So there are other REST APIs available, and we're going to cover some of these as we proceed today. However, this particular one is quite useful if you want to do platform-to-platform integrations, for example, Optimize e-commerce cloud into Optimize experiments. However, if you're going to start to push the boundaries of the integrations, you're more than likely going to be on the paid plan at that particular point. So I don't see it as a big limitation whatsoever. So our first experiment. So today we're going to work through and we're going to code our first experiment up. So we're going to do this on the Foundation code base. So for anyone not familiar, Foundation is a code base available on the Episerver GitHub repo for everyone to check out. It's a reference architecture for Optimize e-commerce cloud, and it contains integrations including CMS, personalization, find, social, visitor intelligence, to name but a few. Our experiment today is going to be on the Foundation category pages. So currently, when a customer lands on a category page, there are served products in order of position. Position refers to the position of the product in the category, in the catalog hierarchy. But does this logic convert into the most sales? And that's what we're going to hopefully prove. So our hypothesis is that if category pages are ordered by price instead of position, so the customers see the cheapest price first, customers will click to view more products, average order value will increase, and revenue will increase. So we're just about to get in first and configure this experiment in Optimize. But first of all, I just want to align us on the 3 key concepts. And once you understand these 3 key concepts, you realize how easy of a product Optimize full stack and rollouts is to use. So firstly, audiences. So audience attributes is a list of key value pairs we build up in code with data pertaining to the current user. So for example, the current user may have a language attribute. And then an audience is a subset of users, of all your users, where one or more attributes match expected values. So what I mean by that is customers whose language attribute match English could be your English-speaking audience. So there's backend code which builds up the current Optimize user attributes object, and then that is sent to Optimize API with events, which leads me on to events. So events are actions the users take on the website. For example, a page view, creating an order, adding to basket, etc. They're sent to Optimize API with the current user attribute included in the request. They can also contain metadata about the event, so such as including your order total in an order event, and this can improve quality of the reporting. So flags and experiments we've kind of covered, but feature flags target an audience. So for example, a feature could target English-speaking audience, or they could target everybody. Experiments report on success of feature variations by metrics measured with events. So now I'll quickly jump into rollouts and just talk you through the interface there and how we configured our experiment. So once you log into rollouts, you'll get an interface just like this. So already I've added a Foundation category experiment. So if I change now my environment to development, I can see the configuration here. So the first thing is you can add a rule. Your rule can either be A/B test or targeted delivery. Targeted delivery is a rollout. So if we want to roll a feature out to a particular audience and kind of manage that rollout or our entire customer base. A/B test is what we're going to focus on today. An A/B test is effectively an experiment. If I click in here, I can see our configuration for our A/B test on category pages. So any A/B test has to have different variations of this feature. So I'll firstly focus on this delivery variations. So here we have price and position. So these are basically the two variations of this feature that our customers are going to get that are in the experiment. It's going to be split up 50-50 between customers who are active in the experiment. Now let's get back up to audiences. So audiences is where we define who is included in this experiment. You can set it to everyone, or I can set it to a particular audience. So for example, I could roll this out just to Spanish logged in users. If I click that, that will choose this particular user group. But I can create and edit this by coming in here to create my audience. So these are my attributes which have been synced from my code base, so with my user context. And these attributes already come out of the box and with the setup instructions I'm about to give you. So straight away we can get a really powerful functionality. It's where we can create and kind of target a market audience. So all I've had to do there is drag market in and then configure it to equal ES, which equals my Spanish market code. Then I've decided that maybe we only want to target logged in users. So I've simply taken this and built and added logged in, and I've gone is true. So this audience now is Spanish logged in users. So it is that easy to take your attributes, use the interface, and build up. Now, in the context of this, because we're on a development environment and we want to easily test, I'm going to roll it out to everybody. I can then decide the percentage of my audience which are included. So in a real-world experiment, maybe I think it's a little bit risky, and I only want to roll it out initially to 50% of sessions. What that means is that 50% of people who come to the website will then enter the experimentation, meaning they will get a breakdown of the variant, and then the other 50% will not be included in this experiment. And that means they'll just get the default behavior with how it is. Their metrics will not be included in reports. Lastly, we have to set the metrics for how we measure success of this experiment. We've decided with our experiment, we want to measure success by, first of all, product page views, then our order value to see does it increase, our average order value, and then to see the revenue. To add or remove a metric, we can basically look at the events which we are synchronizing from our code. Now, the code we're about to run through already has these events set up. You just need to integrate it into the correct place on your web application, which we will shortly run through. So, next step is optimizing Commerce Cloud installation. So, firstly, there is Foundation Experiments code base, which is a great starter, and it's available on the Optimizely GitHub. Credit to David Knipe on this for creating it. It's really great, and there's a full series of blog posts on the features this offers. There's loads of great integrations, including some REST API integrations, visitor groups, ePServer projects. There's even event tracking integrated with the Visitor Intelligence product. It's not opinionated on CMS or Commerce. You can use it on both. And I've linked as well to this configuration instructions. So there is some instructions here for configuring your REST API keys and SDK keys, etc. Once you install the code base. I'm not going to cover that just in the interest of trying to use this 30 minutes as effectively as I can. So, as I said, the Foundation Experiments codebase is not opinionated. My goals were slightly different. I wanted something to be more commerce specific with integrations out of the box in the experiment project that would reduce time to get an experiment running in a commerce application and also minimize the code required in the web application for things like tracking events and executing experiments. So I forked the Foundation codebase and put it in my own repository. I then made some simple updates by adding the Commerce Core dependency, adding a user context to support bot filtering, added some event tracking service using commerce types to again simplify that integration with the web application, and also added an experiment service which can be called directly from the web application and manage some of the back-end integrations. So the updates I added are quite simple, but they're just useful from a commerce perspective. I'll now move on to show you how to install and set up this project. So first of all, if you have the foundation Codebase checked out, you can simply come in and you can check out one of the foundation experiments Codebases I just covered, and you can simply drop it into your project. Once you drop it into your project, you just need to add a reference. From your web application project, you just need to reference foundation experiments. You'll also here need to add the Optimizely SDK and NuGet package for it to work. But effectively, once you do that, you have a lot of the power of this. And then you can then run through David's instructions on configuring your API and SDK keys. And after that, it's just some simple integrations you can do. So I'll talk you through a couple of the core concepts. So the first one I'm going to cover is the initialization module. So when this initialization module fires, it will, if they haven't been synced before, it will create your user attributes and your events. So we'll create these events in Optimizely, so you don't have to do it manually. So for example, these user attributes in this code base, which comes from my GitHub, we have set up and we've configured to set up out of the box. For example, market ID, which you notice is a more commerce-specific integration. So the creator update attribute calls out to the REST API on Optimizely to create or update these. Next, we look at the default user retriever, which is here. So the default user retriever is effectively where we integrate the two key properties that we sync to Optimizely with regard to the user. The first is a user ID. The user ID we are storing in session, and it's basically a GUID that allows Optimizely to track this customer through their journey. Next up is the user attributes. So user attributes are the attributes we have just talked about. So for example, the language, the market, the user logged in, their device, etc. Market ID I've integrated using the Commerce Core API and added things like language code and whether it's a mobile device, which these are really useful in creating your audience. So these are already in the code base. These are going to fire already. You basically get this code out of the box once you install. Next thing, I'll quickly cover events. So I've created an event tracking service. So previously, there was event tracking was integrated with Visitor Intelligence. So Visitor Intelligence as a product is sort of becoming obsolete with the Optimizely data platform taking its place. And it didn't happen to be in the project I was working on. So decided to extract the logic behind this. So I haven't really created this logic, I've more refactored it into its own service. So if we kind of pick maybe the first tracking event here, you'll see that first of all, we get the user, which is important with any tracking event. And effectively, the user contains the user ID and the user attributes that we build up in the background. We then build up our metadata. Our metadata is built up in event tags. So this is where we can send extra data around our event, which can help improve the quality of the reporting and the data we are capturing. Once we build our metadata up, we can then look in here, and this is using the Optimizely SDK, which does a REST call in the background, to then send that tracking data over to Optimizely, and it's recorded there. Now, one of the key functions I mentioned earlier on is I wanted to really reduce the code in the web application to make the meaning that when you install this, you get as much as possible and can get an experiment up and running really quickly. So for that, I have done this. So I'm going to give you an example. So this is the cart service. This is the add to cart method. And I literally have to add one line of code for the track basket event to work, which is, and it already can take the e-commerce.core line item. So it can kind of work with any commerce project. So it's the same thing for, if I come back here and I do find usages on, or go to reference on track order event. Again, in this place order checkout controller, it's one call. We can basically pass our commerce types down, and that was the goal of doing this. And finally, I'm going to just quickly demo the experimentation service. So the experimentation service basically wraps the logic for executing an experiment from your web application. So a couple of key methods there are is feature enabled and decide. Is feature enabled is relative to a rollout project where you can say, is this feature enabled for this audience, and enable it if you need to do it. Now, decide is is for the experiment.
Hi everybody, sorry, we having a bit of technical difficulties there with the message that our partners have recorded for us. I was just checking if there was any problems on our end here, but it looks like the last couple minutes of the video have been cut off, unfortunately. So we'll work on that. We'll provide an update probably, but what I'll probably want to do now is take everybody to the next session, just so we are on time here. So let me grab my screen again, make sure that we have the right screen for you.
Hi everyone. So I'll let
Okay. We should be ready to go. All right, apologies for the last one. Let's hear from Cody and Joey on some updates on certification in the OMVP program.
Hi everyone. So I'll let Cody kick off.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's great to be here. It's great to have seen that amazing demo from Johnny and Mark. And that kind of is a nice intro into a discussion about our MVP program. So if you haven't already heard about our fantastic MVP program, I'll give you a quick introduction. It is really all about community involvement and being a pillar of knowledge and enablement within our technical community. And as we grow and expand with more product sets, our MVP program is also growing. So it's good to are not just the smartest or the most certified or even the most important to closing business. From our perspective, MVPs are really all about helping our community do better work and learn. So you can see the qualifications here are all about helping others, sharing technical knowledge, and community involvement. We give them really great benefits, such as VIP treatment even annual summits when we're allowed to get together. We have really great parties together. And like I mentioned, because our product set is growing, we have more MVPs involved in more different activities and different types of products. So we're expanding to recognize that. And we have digital strategy MVPs, site implementation, optimization, and more. So Joe, if you could go to the next slide, I can talk about some of our new MVP members. So excitingly, we added 11 new members just a few months ago. And I'll go through them quickly just to give respect where respect's due, and maybe some of the partners are listening in here. Alex from Almbrand. Oh, looks like we lost the. There it is. Alex from Alm, Chris Sharp, who used to be at Optimizely at Bluebolt, Liz at Verndale, CTO at Verndale, Eric at Perficient, Himadri at Nishtech, Jacob at Zone, Joe at Adage, Sanjay at RightPoint, Santiago at Verndale, Sean and then in our optimization category, we have 2 of our first MVPs that are doing the kind of work you just saw in the demo, experimentation, optimization. So Sean at Kin + Carta and Simon at Real Digital. And these people are from all over the world. We've got a really great global reach with our MVP program, and some of them are even already running local meetups in places like India and Ecuador. So we're really excited to be growing this program. And the next slide, Joey, I'll talk a little bit about our community more broadly and how that kind of plays into the MVP group. So, you know, the MVPs are privileged members of the community who we hope to stand up and really lead different parts of our community. And like I said before, as our product set's growing, so is our community. And we have personas within that community that are not, and I think that's important to point out. We've got very talented technologists, from developers to data scientists to product owners, growth managers, marketing technicians, people doing the kind of stuff that Dean was talking about earlier, you know, asking questions about, you know, do I want a content hub or do I want a headless, and how do I make all that happen? So that's really great, and we want to invest in our community in a way that allows all of these personas to really connect and learn together, and we hope that the MVPs can actually help drive a lot of that. We have conversations going on in places. It's important to point out we have our forum that's still extremely active. We've got our MVPs in there actually moderating part of the forum. We've got over 10,000 forum topics. And we also have, from the former Optimizely side, a Slack community, if you didn't know. That's public. I encourage everyone who wants to get involved. We have over 3,000 members in there. And of course, we have over 7,000 syndicated blogs on our world site, a lot of them from MVPs, a lot of them from just normal community members who are, you know, sharing their knowledge about how to use our technology. And going forward, we actually are planning exciting in-person events in places like London and others. So keep an ear out for that, especially if you want to get access to more great technical events like this. And we'll be doing an updated online event schedule as well. So keep an ear out for that. And thanks for your time. I'll hand it back to Joey.
Thank you so much, Cody. That's a great summary you provided there. Hopefully, you can still catch the slides there. So I wanted to give you a, with a few minutes remaining, just to give you a quick overview on just some of the things that are happening with the education team. I'd also obviously like to extend my own welcome to the new MVPs, and there's some incredibly talented people joining the community, and there's a huge amount of knowledge and expertise to share. And of course, the education team has also been the backbone of our community for a long time. So I want to spend a few minutes just going through some of the exciting updates that have been happening there. So first of all, to enhance the partner and the individual learning goals, one of the first things is masterclasses. So these are really around sort of they're designed for developers, architects, project leaders, but they're really open to anyone, and they really kind of there to help refine already acquired skills, and they're taught by experts and guest lecturers, and they're going to be really designed around topics that cater outside the implementation side. So it might be preparing for for Optimize CMS 12 and Commerce 14, etc. The first one is scheduled for later this month on September the 29th. So do look out for further details there. The next thing is the certification exchange, and that's the certification amnesty, if you will. So many people already know that we provided this for people who were certified on Sitecore. We're really just to open it up to other platforms really as well. So what's included in that is a training package and one certification exam free of charge as well. And so that's obviously continuing with the Sitecore, but if there's other people who are maybe today using Kentico Experience Developer, Adobe AEM developer certification, if there's others, then do get in contact, but then it's really about getting them certified on Optimizing, making sure that they're able to use the best and greatest. And then the subject matter expert program. So this is around making sure that all our education pieces are bang up to date. So leveraging the expertise of people already in the community to really help them sort of refine and improve their current skills, but also for them to share them with the wider community as well. Moving, and that kind of really fits into that, the enhancement of the current certification. So looking at how we can increase the exposure of the certifications, make them more relevant in the field, keep them bang up to date, and across more of our products as well. So one of the new pieces around the new certifications that's going to be available is experimentation certifications that's coming shortly, and that's really to give that extra accreditation around those working with web or full stack as well. And perhaps the thing that I'm most excited about for the community is the digital badging and credential service for certified developers as well. So they're going to be digital credentials that can be shared around social media, added to your profiles on things like LinkedIn as well. So really there's lots going on that really supporting and adding to the community so they can really showcase their experience and their breadth of knowledge across all of our products and all of our services as well. So I hope you'll agree there's an awful lot that's been going on. So without further ado, I will hand back to the host.
All right, we a little bit ahead of time. We've got a few minutes until we can hear the wrap up and the partner awards with Shane. Thanks everybody for joining today. Apologies for a little hiccup earlier. Hopefully this was really informative for you. Make sure that you continue to engage on the chat. And if you want to go back to the general session, please expand the menu on the left-hand side of your screen. You should be able to see the full agenda there, and then click on join to go back to the general room, to general session, where we're going to hear an update on the partner awards and a close-up by the team. So thanks again, everybody, for joining, and hope to see you there again soon.